Hello there and welcome everybody, it's Morgana here with another demonstration for you today. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this lovely Golden Pathways semi-abstract watercolour painting. So I'm starting today with a piece of 100% cotton watercolour paper. I'm using Saunders Waterford hot press, size 1/4 of an imperial sheet, so just a little under A3. I've got it taped onto my board already and propped up on my easel at a roughly 45-degree angle, and I'm just beginning by giving it a good old dousing with some clean fresh water. And today I'm going to be using this palette knife to do the initial painting, to get that wash in, get those colours in. I'm using Royal Gold paint, which is a lovely metallic colour, along with a little Payne's grey and some Cobalt Blue. I'll pop a full list of my equipment, all my sort of bits and bobs in the video description as usual for interested parties. But for now you can see all I'm doing is using the flat of the palette knife to swipe the paint diagonally across the paper. You can see where the paint has collected and where it's really very thick. I'm actually scooping up a little bit with the palette knife and distributing it a little bit more evenly in the shapes that I want. I'm essentially going to do a little zigzag here, just really nice shallow diagonals. You can see that I'm adding in more paint onto the palette knife as and when I think it's necessary. This technique does use a little bit more paint than I'm used to for watercolour, but it also gives you these wonderful sort of spontaneous textures, which I'll be showing you in just a minute. So essentially forming a really gentle sloping zigzag shape with the palette knife for the first stage of this painting. And now I'm going to bring in my trusty spray bottle and just give it a good spritz following the line of the paint that I've just put on. So I've got plenty of water on my board already, so what I'm going to do is just give it another quick spray, and I'm going to tip it up and tilt it sideways, which is going to encourage the paint to run when you get this lovely diagonal movement across the board. And you can see there on that top left we've got a lovely sweep of diagonality, if that's even a word, in the colour. We've got that gold starting to move really nicely, so I've brought it back up to vertical, which is how you can see it at the moment. I'm holding it with one hand and spraying with the other, and wishing that I had another hand free at the same time to move it about a bit with the palette knife, but it is what it is. And I think we're getting some really nice movement on this. Not only are we getting those lovely sort of big sweeping washes of colour where the water has gone on in quite a large sort of patch, like up on that top left area. Getting these sort of little smaller runs as well, where the paint has just gone into the patterns that have been left by the spray bottle. So in that lower corner there, you can see it almost look like tree roots, or the sort of veining colour that you get on some gemstones, which I think is a really, really lovely effect. So I want to keep some of that. So I'm just going to carefully encourage the paint a little bit with my palette knife. I've got the board back on my easel, so it's slightly tilted to keep the paint moving, but not too heavily, so that I can still work on it. But we're still getting that lovely sort of slight downward drift of the paint because as you can see from the reflection of the palette knife, as I'm working, there is still quite a lot of water on that piece of paper at the moment. And this is one of the reasons why I like to use cotton watercolour paper for this sort of work. I think it stands up really well to having lots of water put on it. It doesn't buckle or fall apart nearly as easily as pulp paper. You can really sort of do some damage, so to speak, and it'll hold up just fine. Of course, you certainly can use pulp sort of paper, ordinary sort of tree-ish paper. You basically use whatever you like and whatever works for you, but this is, I find, what works for me best at the moment. As you can see, I'm just tapping with the palette knife at the moment, and the paint that I'm picking up on the edge of the palette knife blade is just making these lovely sort of striations on the paper, these lovely sort of quick horizontal marks that I'm really enjoying at the moment. And now I'm just giving it one last spray in this bottom corner just to get that last little run that I'm looking for. And I'm actually going to prop it up now and leave it to dry. You can see there I've got that lovely veining look. You can see it's propped up on some newspaper and plenty of tissue just on that bottom corner to get that lovely diagonal movement. I'm sort of spraying with one hand and filming with my phone with the other, so apologies for my shaky footage. But this is what it now looks like now that it's dry. You can see we've got that lovely directionality in the flow of paint there. It's all sort of going from left to right, which I really enjoy. And we've got our sort of rudimentary shapes here that we can begin to work with, our lovely abstract shapes that I can start to turn into a slightly more recognisable landscape. So with these long runs that we've got here on the left side, I decided that they would make very fine trees. So I'm beginning with some really quite light paint, just following those shapes and starting to bring the branches out and fill in the trunks. You can see that I'm starting with quite a watered down Payne's grey. Now as this process goes on, I think I changed my mind halfway through, as most artists do, I believe, and I decided that they needed to be a bolder colour in order to stand up against that big old wash of gold that's behind them. So beginning with a really light Payne spray and then transitioning later on into a bolder and darker Payne spray, but this gives a really nice sort of background texture to the trees and to those little branches, gives them some shape and shadow before going in with the darker paint. And as you can see, I'm just beginning to add in a few little sort of grassy textures around the roots, around the base of the trees as well, before going over the lot in, in darker paint, which I'll show you in just a moment. There we go, the wonderful transition. So as you can see, I've gone over the trees in Payne's grey, using exactly the same technique as I just showed you, painting in the original trees. And now I'm just going to pop in a distant background sweep of mountain. And this is really easy with the big flat brush. You can see with that lovely sharp edge, it's actually really easy to get those straight lines in. And I'm using really watered down Payne's grey, which I actually mixed in a little bit of the deep gold as well, just to give it that interesting metallic sparkle. The gold that I'm using is a metallic paint. It has a wonderful rich iridescence, which you can't quite see at this angle, but at the end of the video I'll try and show you a little bit better. This entire painting almost has this wonderful iridescent sheen. So I mixed in a little of the gold with the grey to do this mountain. And as you can see, I can just pull out a few lines with a piece of clean tissue, just to get a few pale highlights back into the paper there. And now just getting a little bit of detail, a little bit of texture into that mountain. Basically you can either use your palette knife like I just did there. Basically I had some half-dried paint, a little bit just on the bottom of the palette knife, and I just scraped it across, the equivalent of dry brushing really, just to get a little bit of texture, a little bit of shadow and shape onto that mountain range. Or you can use an actual brush and do a little bit of dry brushing. Just to get some movement and some shape into that mountain peak. And you can see I'm just filling in with a little flat brush, just getting a few darker lines and darker shadows coming down there from that ridge. So you can see here I'm actually trying to scrub out some of the paint with a tissue. It got a little bit dark there around the base of the mountain, so what I'm doing is dabbing some fresh paint on and a little bit of water, and then just using the tissue to sort of soften down and blend the paint around that base there, so we get essentially a path going up along that way, sort of a soft look around that base. This is probably where I should have gone and gotten some clean water to do this. I do believe that is my paint water I'm dabbing on there, and of course it's gotten quite dark and murky with all that Payne's grey, so well, I think it works actually to have that sort of soft, misty looking grey path coming up past that mountain slope. It gives it a little bit of extra atmosphere. So now that my path is done, I've decided to pop in a couple of figures. As always with this sort of semi-abstract work, where you put your figures will often depend on the shapes that you get in your initial wash. I had this lovely clear space that almost sort of turned itself into a pathway along the top here, and with the addition of the mountain in the background, I decided that a pair of hikers going up onto the top of this golden ridge and perhaps looking down on those trees below would be the final touch for this painting. So as you can see, I hope if you peer closely, you can see that I've just really lightly penciled in the silhouettes before then going in with my fine brush and some Payne spray to just add in my little figures. Of course, if you're feeling very confident, you can go straight in with your brush and paint. Just for safety's sake, I always prefer to just get a really rough outline with my pencil first, just really lightly, just to make sure that I've got the proportions of my figures right, and just to make sure that I've got the placement correct as well. And I think that right figure was just a little bit high, so you can see there just adjusting the path slightly to make sure she's actually standing on it. And here we are, this is the finished painting now. Really pleased with how this one ended up coming out. So thank you everybody very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed watching this painting process. I certainly enjoyed doing it. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, or subscribe if you're new to my channel. We'd love to have you around. I hope you can see how beautifully that gold paint is really glinting up. That lovely metallic paint, I think, with the blue is just really, really stunning. A lovely combination. So thank you all for watching again. If you'd like to see some more videos like this, hop over to my Patreon page following the link in the video description for some more exclusive video tutorials, plus some other bits and bobs. But thank you all again. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video.